you don't want to take a bunch of risks to hit home runs, because when you take risks to hit home runs, you could also strike out, right? But with a 9-pound deficit, you know, what did I have to lose? What's up, everybody? Hey, it's Ken. I just got done fishing the Bass Angler Magazine Pro-Am on the Delta, and I'm gonna go over a recap of that event. You know, just to give people an idea, it was in April, and Phil Tilbury ended up winning. He had 61-41 total for 3 days. It's a non-shared weight format, so that's 15 fish. And Monroe was second with 57-16, and I ended up actually 7th with 45-89. So after the first 2 days, you know, I had a great day one, which I had almost 21 pounds, and primarily caught those fish basically on 2 baits. I caught them on flip and stick and a frog that day. I caught some fish on a spinnerbait also, but it didn't end up. Those fish didn't matter. And then day 2, it changed, you know. And then I pulled a vibrating jig out, Jackhammer, and I ended up catching like 14 and change, which kept me in 3rd place. So I'm gonna go over those first 2 days and then talk about how I changed a little bit of my approach on day 3 because of the deficit that I had. Okay, so the first day went pretty textbook, so to speak. You know, I was able to get some big bites kind of from the morning and then into like the early afternoon. Didn't really have to make a lot of hard decisions, is what I say. So that morning I started off throwing a black frog, and I like throwing I throw a bunch of different frogs, so there isn't any one frog that I prefer all the time. You know, so this is it's a SPRO frog in Black Widow. I throw this frog at Clear Lake, and I've had a lot of success on it. It's a little bit smaller frog, and you know, so pretty simple. It's just a black and red. It's called Black Widow, I believe. So it's black and red, Poppin frog. It's got the red tails. I throw it on 60 Sunline Braid. Actually, this is the AMZ8 braid, and then I throw it on a 7.5 foot, like I would call it medium to not quite heavy, but medium to, you know, medium heavy side GLoomis. It's like a light weight flip and stick basically. It's 7.5, and then I throw it on a Curado XG 200. You know, it's a workhorse of a reel. The rod gives me, you know, I can make all the casts I need to make with it. You know, so I ended up catching probably 10 or 11 on day 1 on this frog. 1 for sure, and maybe 2 of those 11 fish I caught made the show, meaning that I weighed in. So, and then what I was doing is, you know, there wasn't really a lot of grass and vegetation matted on the surface yet, you know, because it was still April. So I was throwing it around, you know, like just a little bit of mat and a little bit of grass that was around. A lot of open water stuff, you know, places where I think fish were getting ready to spawn or were spawning, type of deal. So, you know, I really like, you know, I throw a bunch of different frogs, but for this tournament, in this situation, I felt like that one was probably the best bet. So on day 1, that's what I started off doing. And like I said, it went pretty textbook. Ended up catching like 10 or 11 on it. You know, and I caught them throughout the day, right? The conditions you know, although the wind was blowing, there was like a 2-hour window during the day where the wind didn't blow very much at all. So I was able to pick that frog up and work it around those shallow kind of spawning areas or hard bottom areas. Again, it wasn't over any matted vegetation or any of that stuff or matted grass. And then, you know, like I said, I caught some fish on a spinnerbait. Also, I don't know if I have that spinnerbait, but yeah, so I caught some fish on this spinnerbait also, this exact one. It's actually the exact, I've had this spinnerbait tied on since Lake Martinez. So probably caught, you know, they bit on day one, so I probably caught 10 or 12 keepers on this also. None of them made the show, but you know, because the wind was blowing and things like that, that really ended up being a player for me. So, and then the rest of the day of day one, I basically flipped and punched a bunch, right? And I flipped, you know, the fish bit, like I said, the fish bit pretty well on day one. So didn't have to downsize my bait or any of that stuff. So, you know, I throw what I always throw, right? I mean, this is my confidence bait. You know, it's a big bite, yo mama. And, you know, so it's a GMoney skirt with a tungsten weight. And, you know, I basically flipped, pitched, and punched this. I would say if we had a 9-hour day, I probably punched for about half of the day, and then I frogged for, you know, like 2-ish hours, and then I basically threw a spinnerbait the other hour and a half ish or so, you know, and that's predominantly what I did, you know, for the first 2 days. And like I said, you know, the first day I weighed almost 21. I think I was in third. And then day two, things started to change. You know, basically the fish bit really good in practice. The first 2 days of practice were pretty silly as far as bait bites and things like that. And then on first day of the tournament, it was also kind of silly because I ended up catching at least 25 or 30 keepers on day one, you know, and I had a decent bag. Like I said, I had my biggest fish that I caught on the Yo Mama was like a 560, you know. So, and then I just had 4 really solid fish to go with that 560 to get to 21 pounds. And then on day two, as the tournament wore on for me, the bite was getting a little bit worse and worse. You know, just as far as the activity level, you know. So on day two, you know, I tried to do the same things. Basically, they would not touch a frog the rest of the tournament for me. Like, I never got another bite on it. So after getting, I would say I got probably 15 to 17 bites on it on day one. After getting that many bites on day one, I never got touched on it on day two, and I never got touched on it on day three. You know, so that bite went completely away. You know, and then on the second day, you know, even, you know, trying to punch them, you know, it was a lot more challenging. So, you know, with the conditions and the wind coming up, on day two, it was also a little bit cooler on day two, you know, which, and I always say this, you know, like they bit well in the first 2 days of practice. And when I say they bit well, you know, I'm not always talking about the result or how large the fish are. I'm just talking about the activity level of the fishery, right? Because if the activity level is high, then there's a lot of fish biting. And that's what happened the first 2 days. Practice, and then the first day of the tournament. I mean, they, for me at least, they really bit. And then on the second day, it was probably 10:30, you know, so we're 4 hours into it. No, it was a little earlier now. It's probably 9. Yeah, it was by 9. You know, we're almost 3 hours into it, and I had like 2 fish, you know. So I pulled the plug, and I made a long run, and I went to go look for basically some calmer water because of the way the wind was blowing, and I just got away from where I was fishing, and I put 2 rods that I love away, and I got you know, it was funny, you know, on day 2, and I can't explain why, I didn't feel like they were going to eat the spinnerbait, even though on day 1 I just told you that I probably had 12-ish bites on it. So on day 2, what really saved me was I ended up catching them all on a vibrating jig. I got on some riprap banks and flats, places where, you know, there was some deep water close by, and there was some really clean grass growing, and the fish were either funneling in or they were funneling out to spawn, right? So what I was doing is I would work basically I would work the inside edges first because the tide was falling, and if you don't work those edges first, you'll never get to work them, because once the tide falls, it's too shallow. Okay, so I would work the inside edges first, and then I would gradually move out a little bit further as the tide was dropping out. And it really saved me that day. You know, like I said, I started doing that about 9:30, and I had 2 fish in the boat. So the bait I ended up throwing was it's a jackhammer, and it's spring crawl color. And I think what was key was, you know, that bright red bottom, but also what was key was the sweet potato pie kamikaze Swimon. That's what that bait is. You know, like I'll just try to hold it still, and you can kind of see how much it bounces around, and you know, it wiggles and moves. You know, obviously when this thing's going back and forth, you know, it's just flicking back and forth like that. You know, and then when you kill it, it really looks crawdaddy, and it looks shaddy or bait fishy at the same time. You know, so, and it comes in a bunch of different great colors. It's very durable. You know, so this is the actual bait that I ended up throwing. You know, and you know, I throw a chatter pretty much almost everywhere I go. And it's funny because everywhere else I go, like including Clear Lake and obviously all the other lakes, I throw it on straight fluorocarbon. So, but on the Delta is the one place where I actually throw it on braid. Okay, so it's super thin braid. It's Sunline PEX8 in green. And like I said, it's very thin, so it's very castable type of deal. And then I tie it to 20 shooter. I either use shooter or assassin. So yeah, so this is the assassin, and then this is the sniper. So I use both for my leader, and I tie it to a 20-pound leader. The reason that I do that is because you make a lot of long casts with the vibrating jig. The Delta is a shallow water, grassy fishery. Okay, so for me, what I've realized over the years, you know, when you make that long cast and you start up your chatter, and it starts up, a big one eats you. They slackline you, you know, on the end of a long cast, and you're catching up to that fish. You know, your whole rod, everything's starting to work. You know, everything loads, and then that fish loads up. I found for me that I was losing a lot of those fish in that situation, right? Where, like I said, end of a long cast, a big one eats you, it's down in the grass, you know, everything's loaded and it feels super solid, everything's happening, and then you start cranking and you have it on for a second and then it comes off. I was having that happen for me more often than I wanted, right? So that's why I went to the braid. You know, I can make just as long as a cast with the braid. You know, I typically will put somewhere around a 8 to 10 foot leader on it, fluorocarbon, and then now when I make that long cast and that bait falls and one eats it when it's fallen, like at the end of the long cast, you start cranking it up and it's already moved off or it's moved toward you. I'm able to really, you know, everything happens still pretty slow, right? Because I'm using a swim bait rod, you know, from GLoomis, and see how much, I mean, it really bends down into this midsection. So I'm using a swim bait rod, so everything loads slowly still. The difference now is I can use my reel to really lock that whole system together, right? So fluorocarbon's going to stretch a little bit, the braid's not going to, the rod's going to start loading, I'm going to start feeling that fish, and then I'm basically reeling into that fish, and then when everything locks up, then I'm able to just kind of pull. And for me, I believe that having that braid on there allows that hook that's maybe just starting to work in. Well, after everything locks and I'm able to reel down on it and just pull like this, I believe it just enough to drive that barb on those fish that are on the very end. You know, a fish eats you closer to the boat or something like that. You know, using 20-pound fluorocarbon, you know, I think that's fine. But for those longer casts and in those weedy type of lakes, yeah, I just like this system better for me, right? I tie a crazy Alberto knot. You know, it's pretty foolproof, especially if you work it properly. I throw it on a 6.2-to-1 Shimano Curado 200, and this is a 7.5 foot you know, GLoomis swim bait rod. You know, so on day 2, that really saved me. You know, I ended up catching, you know, after having 2 around 9, the rest of the day I ended up, I guess not the rest of the day. From like 9 to 1, I threw it for about 3 hours, got to about my 14 pounds. And then, you know, and then once I got there, like, okay, well, I knew I was in the cut at that point. I was then trying to go catch a 6 or 7 pounder to give me 20 pounds, you know, because that's what I felt that I needed to, you know, that was my goal. Every day, my goal was to catch 20 a day, right? That was my goal. So, because, you know, if you get 20 a day on the last day, you know, like I said, Tilbury won with 61-40 something, you know, so if I have 20 and I have 20 and I have 20, that's 60. Well, I'm only 1 bite away from winning, right? So, so I always want to, you know, that's the part I love about tournament fishing is on a multi-day event, you know, being in first place or leading it after 2 days never means you had a chance to win that tournament. It just means you were in a good position. Okay, so truly having a chance to win a tournament is, you know, when you're on that last day, you know, because on that last day you still have 5 fish to catch, right? So you could be leading it by 5 pounds. If you never get a bite the last day, you're nowhere near winning the tournament. Okay, so you could be leading the tournament and you still got 5 fish to catch. You know, so for me, I never get too high, I never get too low. I know that there's still business to do. You know, the job's not done until the scales are closed. And, you know, I mean, I've had winning fish in my boat before and not make it back. So I always say that, right? There's so many things that can happen throughout the day. So on the last day, you know, what I strive for and what I look forward to is when I've caught 4 of those 5 fish, so to speak, throughout the day, and I'm 1 manageable bite away from winning this event, right? And for me, you know, whatever that manageable bite is, right? So if I'm on Clear Lake, you know, a manageable bite might be, you know, anything from 4 to 6 pounds, right? I'm not asking for something heroic. Same thing on the Delta, right? 4 to 6 pounds, right? A place like Shasta, Oroville, or somewhere like that, you know, it might be a 3-pounder, right? So when you get one manageable bite away from winning, you know, that's one decision, one cast, one execution. That's it. You're gonna win the tournament, right? It's not all those decisions and all those things that have to go right. You know, you're just, like I said, one decision, one cast, one execution away from winning this event. You know, that's what I enjoy. You know, I enjoy being in that position. So after throwing the vibe jig, right, which I say saved me, I was stubborn, but I was consciously stubborn. So I went to frog and flip the rest of the day, right? I figured, okay, look, I got 14 pounds with a 2-pounder. Figured if I catch a 6 or a 7, right, that would move me up additional 4 to 5 pounds. Well, a 6-pounder will move me additional 4 pounds up, right? So that would have given me, you know, 18, you know, mid to high 18-ish. You know, so I made a conscious effort, like, hey, look, I'm not sure they're going to bite this, but it's the one way I know. You know, I know big ones eat a punching rod, and I know big ones eat a frog, right? So based on the conditions and the tide that I had, that's what I decided to go do. So I pulled those same 2 rods out, and I actually, because I felt the bite was on that was not as good as day 1, I actually went to a different bait. So I used to love throwing this bait for the longest. Okay, so this is a missile crawl. Okay, it's made by Missile Baits. So they don't make it anymore, but I really liked throwing this bait. Right, holds a 3/0 punch hook really good, plastic's good, colors are great. Okay, so but like I said, they don't make it anymore. So what I started going to last year is a Big Bite. Right, I mean, I'm sponsored by Big Bite, so you know, so I was looking for something that was similar. Okay, so this is a Big Bite Swimon. Okay, it's made, well, originally designed to go on a like a back of a trailer type of deal. Okay, so like I said, I like throwing this bait. Right, it's got that red on the bottom, and so I was looking for something similar to replace this bait. All right, so, and I started throwing like I said, I started throwing a Swimon in June bug, right? That was kind of the closest thing that I could flip. And if you look at these 2 baits, right, they are almost identical, like in length, right? I know the Swimon's a little bit, just a hair longer, and they got similar little crawls on the ends of them. And if you look on this side, you know, they're very similar in color. Right? So when the fish get a little, what I call finicky, right, or picky, and they won't, you know, sometimes for me, they won't eat this, you know, they're like tapping or knocking, you know, you'll feel them tail whack it, or they'll eat it and they won't get it all in their mouth or anything like that. I like to basically downside my bait a little bit. And like I said, I do like this bait. I've thrown it for, you know, a long time. And then, like I just showed you, like, so I started throwing. This is Red Ghost, I believe, is what the color is. Yeah. So it's Kamikaze Swimon in Red Ghost. And you know, it's a great, you know, Big Bite really makes a really durable bait. You know, a lot of the stuff that I post with them, I mean, it's genuine. I'm throwing the product, you know, so it's a very durable bait, holds a hook great, holds a 3/0 or a 4/0 hook. And then it's segmented, right? Like I said, it's originally made to go on a back of a trailer. I mean, back of a jig or a vibrating jig, you know, but I've started to flip, pitch, and punch it. So, so I went to that the rest of the day. It did not happen, you know, so I probably spent the last 2 hours of day 2 looking for that big bite. And it didn't happen. And I knew I was forcing it, right? Because I had enough weight to make the cut. And I was trying to get to my my benchmark, so to speak. So that was the end of day 2. I actually held my spot on day 2. So I started day 1 and 3rd. After weighing like 1480 or something like that, I stayed in 3rd place. Okay, there was a bunch of shuffling that went around. You know, Tilbury backed up his day. So I ended up going into day 3 with now it was almost a 9-pound deficit. Okay, so which is not insurmountable. Because I always tell people, like, the Delta it'll bite you. Right? It'll bite the best of you. It doesn't matter. I think other than mead, the Delta is one of the hardest places to be consistent on. Right? You know, guys can catch them, you know, on a one-day tournament here, there, and there, but day in and day out, you know, to be consistent over a course of 3 days, I'd say for us out west, other than Lake Mead, to stay consistent, the Delta is one of the hardest places to stay consistent every day. And that's what I love about it, right? It's a challenge and a puzzle every day, every minute of every hour of every day. Your brain has to be ahead of where you're currently at, right? You have to be, you know, a lot of times I'm 2-3 steps ahead, you know, of where I'm currently fishing, right? I'm always thinking, you know, and I do that, obviously, the Delta has taught me to apply that mindset to other fisheries, right? It's just become in my, it's ingrained, and it's basically in my DNA. So, day 3, okay, so I had like I don't think it was quite 9 pounds, it was like 8 something, right? And because I know the Delta will bite anybody, right? And I also knew that catching, you know, 14 pounds was not easy, right? I felt that, okay, well, if Phil has an okay day and he catches 14 pounds, well, if I put 8 on the 14, right? Well, that's only 22 pounds, right? So my goal for day 3 was to catch 24 pounds, right? I felt that if I caught 24 pounds, it would force him and everybody else to at least catch 14, right? Which is no gimme on the Delta. So that was my goal, right? Was get to 14, and then, I mean, get to 24, and then anything above and beyond that, I'd be able to make a run at it, right? So it's, you know, basically for me, I just think about it in math terms. It's real simple, right? So, and 24 pounds is not a heroic bag on the Delta in April. You know, I mean, you know, I've caught that hundreds of times. So knowing what setting my goal and understanding what my day was, you know, I felt like, okay, what would give me the best opportunity to catch my goal weight? And what you don't want to do, or what I don't want to do in a tournament is early on is you don't want to take a bunch of risks to hit home runs, because when you take risks to hit home runs, you could also strike out, right? But with the 9 pound deficit, you know, what did I have to lose, right? For me, there was no difference in 2nd and 10th at all, right? So whether I finished 2nd or I finished 10th, it didn't matter to me, because they did a top 10 cut for the last day. So I was third, and I was perfectly comfortable if taking risks, falling to 10th. And I did not want to do enough to where I was second. Okay, so I put a lot of rods away, and I actually pulled a buzzbait out. I pulled a D&M buzzbait out. Yeah, this one right here. Okay, so I pulled this out. It's D&M frame. I downsized the blades, and you know, you put a toad on it. So didn't catch any on it, but I was throwing it. Okay, and then I basically threw two other rods. I threw a frog sparingly, but I did have it out. Basically threw the same frog that I threw on day one. Never got touched on it, you know, but I threw it in places where I could get touched on it, you know, and I basically flipped like all day. And the difference is my approach on day three. The difference is I actually burned a lot of gas. I burned like 38 gallons. And because I know the Delta so well, I basically from the start, because of the deficit I had from the start, like I started somewhere completely different on day three, right? Because I'm trying to hit home runs, right? Like right from like as soon as the bell rings, I'm trying to hit home runs, right? Because to get to 24 pounds, you know, realistically, you got to hit 3 home runs, right, in a day, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, you got to catch 3 fish over 5 pounds, right? Because if you catch 3 5-pounders, that's 15, right? So to get to 24, right, I still need 9 pounds. So I still need 2 4.5ers, right? So well, what you hope is, you know, one of those home runs you hit's not a 5er, it's a 7, right? Well, then now, if you have 2 5s and a 7, right, then now you got 17 pounds for 3, right? Well, to get to 24, I only need, my 2 other ones only need to weigh 7 pounds, right? So that's 2 3.5-pounders, right? Very, very doable, very manageable. So in order to get to 24, you got to hit 3 home runs, right? So in order to hit 3 home runs, your approach has to be different and put yourself in those positions to hit those home runs, right? You know, you can't keep doing the same thing expecting a different result, right? That's typically not what happens in life in general. So I started somewhere completely different on day 3, even though I was in 3rd place, and you know, I had a chance to stay high in the standings. You know, I felt like if I would have went through this for the first 2-3 hours, I felt like I could have caught maybe 16 or 17 pounds is what my feeling was. But like I said, you know, what does that do? It either keeps me in 3rd or it moves me to 2nd, right? And like I said, the difference between 2nd and 10th is the same to me, right? So I started somewhere completely different, and I basically frogged and flipped for about 9 hours. And you know, and like I said, I ran from Big Break, you know, to the north, to the central. I even ran, you know, into the Stockton area. You know, I burned a lot of gas. So, and I ended up catching not that many. I think I only ended up catching like 8 fish on day 3. And I ended up weighing like 12 pounds, something like that, 10 or 12 pounds, you know, and I was okay with it. You know, it is what it is, you know, and I don't like using the term, oh, I went swinging for the fences, because I feel like my style of fishing, I'm always swinging anyways. So I'm not going to, you know, use that, oh, I swang for the fence, so I fell short. So, but I consciously made those decisions that, like I said, I knew I needed to hit 3 home runs today. So in order to do that, I had to put myself in, you know, to hit 3 home runs, you probably got to put yourself in at least 30 or 40 positions to hit that. You know, probably you're going to hit a home run 10% of the time, right? So you have to mentally make decisions Like, okay, if I want to target 3 5-pounders, 3 fish over 5 pounds, how am I going to do that? Right? Every part of every day, how am I going to do that? Right? You know, sometimes, you know, if you just fish down the bank, that's not going to work. Right? Some days it does, right? Because you know, you land on them and the big ones are up and they're biting. Some days that does work, but on the Delta, it's about putting yourself in those high percentage, not just spots, but it's all those ingredients that have to come together. You know, weather, tide, flow, direction, level, right? For me, it's a very complex puzzle to put together. So on day 3, that's what ended up happening, right? I basically made a conscious decision. That's just what I was going to go do. It did not happen, and I'm comfortable living with the results. So really, it was really simple fishing if you think about it, right? I mean, I threw a chatter with the Swimon. I've punched a Yo Mama and a Swimon. I threw a frog, and then I caught fish on a spinnerbait, right? I mean, pretty fun, simple fishing throughout the tournament. Congratulate Phil Tilbury, you know, great dude, and you know, especially, you know, you listen to his story, you know, very successful business person, and you know, he was genuinely excited backstage when we were telling him he had this thing won. You know, and emotional, you know, I mean, we work really hard to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. So when you finally climb that mountain, it's pretty amazing feeling. So that's my recap. I'll put links and stuff into the comments, so that way you can find it easy. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And I am going straight to Lake Havasu. And we'll see how that ends up. MLF Lake Havasu is like tomorrow, practice. So anyways, take care. Peace out.